everyone. So I've been wanting to do this video for a while, my breastfeeding journey, just because I know that not everyone is able to breastfeed the same way, and some people don't see exclusively pumping or pumping as breastfeeding. And being that I had to breastfeed twins as well, I'm a little different, and I'm also different from other mothers who also breastfeed twins. So my babies were born at 34 weeks and 5 days. So my milk supply wasn't in quite yet. I started pumping about 4 hours after they were born. I only could get like a few drops out, and we had to use a tiny syringe. I'll have to go get those. I'll show you. Yeah, that's it. And I also have a bunch of these ones still. So I was only able to get a little bit in these things. And I remember whatever I definitely could, I would be filling this syringe as much as I can and then giving it to the NICU, and then they would mix it in with the donor's breast milk that the babies had. So the babies were on donor's breast milk for the first week, and then after that week, it was all up to me, just per hospital policies. It took me about a week and a half to get my milk supply in. I remember when I was finally able to fill one of these completely full, I was so happy, and that's only 1 milliliter. 1 milliliter. And then slowly it was those little 30 milliliters, which is 1 ounce. Those little tubes, I was slowly getting to the point where I could fill those, and so on. I think the max I ever got was about, I could get 5 or 6, 5, sometimes 5.5 ounces on my right side, and on a really full day, it was about 2.5 ounces on my left. My left was always the slow poke. It never caught up. So during that second week that the babies were alive, that they were only dependent on my breast milk, they were also put on Similac Neosure formula because they were preemies. The doctors wanted to make sure they got their calories so that they'd be gaining the appropriate weight so that they could eventually go home with us. And since then, the babies have always been breast milk and formula, just because I never could produce enough breast milk to feed them only that. I did try to nurse the babies about in their second week, and Rory was the first one I tried to breastfeed, and she latched right away. I never really had issues getting them to latch. So she latched right away, but she was very impatient. She wouldn't nurse long enough for my milk to come through because my milk still was like not there yet. So she would get very impatient and then delatch and give up. And then after that, it was trying to get her to latch again, and she would just give up and throw a fit. And so after you have a baby, your hormones and mood swings are all over the place, and you're feeling a failure. So I've got this screaming baby who's hungry now, and I wasn't getting anything for her. I would just, okay, let's get her bottle now, kind of thing. But I did get her to nurse a little bit during that week. And then I would also try to nurse Warren. So what I did about 10 minutes on each side with one baby. And then after the baby nursed, I would then give them a bottle afterwards just to make sure that they got enough food, just because I knew I wasn't pumping a whole lot in general. So after I nursed and then bottle fed the one baby, I would go and bottle feed the other baby. And then after that, I would pump that whole thing took about an hour and a half to do that. And I pumped for 30 minutes every 3.5 hours whenever the babies were done eating, so that my milk supply could start coming in faster. And then when it came to the next feeding, I would try to nurse the other baby, bottle, and then bottle the other baby and pump again. And by the time I was done with everything, I barely had an hour break before I had to repeat the process again. And I was just so exhausted, and I was so frustrated because it was overwhelming trying to nurse both of them. I didn't feel comfortable trying to do tandem feeding, which is when you nurse both of them at the same time. I couldn't hold them properly, and I just did not feel comfortable doing it. So after a week of trying to do this and just being so overwhelmed and so exhausted, which does not help your milk supply at all when you're stressing, I decided that I'm just going to exclusively pump for a while and maybe try this again later down the road. But right now, the main focus was trying to get the breast milk that I could for the babies and just help them through the NICU days to get them out of the NICU. And so I focused mostly on that, and that helped a little bit. But it is so hard to pump when you are so exhausted from trying to take care of 2 babies, and then you have to pump for 30 minutes. You don't even want to know how many times I spilled. Like, I would be pumping, and then all of a sudden I just feel wet because I didn't have the suction on properly. And I couldn't do those hand-free bras because it never had a good enough suction to keep the pump thing, cup thing on. And so I always had to hold them. And eventually down the road, I was able to hold both of them with one hand while I either was on my phone or something else, just to kind of make those 30 minutes go by. But yes, I never could do the bras. I wish I could. And I think about halfway through the first 2 weeks, we decided that I needed to go up in a size. I think it was like a 30 millimeter size cup. I don't know. I had to go to the next size, a large, which helped my supply a little bit better because I guess it was getting like strangled, or so to speak, with a smaller size. So once I got the proper size, it started to go a little bit easier. So when I was trying to get the babies to latch, Rory would latch perfectly fine and then get cranky, delatch, latch, on and off. And then Warren, he would kind of latch, but he was always a sleepy baby. It was a lot of work to get him to eat because he would just fall asleep in the middle. He was kind of lazy. So when I was trying to nurse him, he would latch a little bit and then he would just fall back to sleep because he's right against mom's warmth. So I was constantly having to unswaddle him or rub underneath his chin just to get him to stay awake and to keep going. But he always just kind of fell asleep, and then he wasn't eating. And so, of course, when you're in the NICU, you want him to gain weight, and he wasn't. So that was part of another reason why I also needed to take a break from it until I got a routine down and felt a little bit calmer and confident in it. So I pumped every 3.5 hours for 30 minutes for the first 4 months. And during that time, I was also trying to do all the things that I could to try to increase my supply. I tried supplements like fenugreek, and fenugreek isn't always helpful for everyone, and I was one of those people. It decreased my supply, which is definitely not what I was looking for. So I didn't use that anymore. And then I guess there was a flaxseed, if I remember right. I would put it in my smoothies. I would drink a smoothie every day in the morning for like a breakfast to help. And then I also later on tried just oatmeal because oats, I think, were helpful. That helped a little bit, I think, but it didn't really make a huge difference. So I just couldn't get my milk supply in. I just couldn't get my milk supply to gain. I couldn't get it to go much more. So what I had was what I had. And I tried pumping every 3 hours. I did not have a time to pump every 2 hours like some moms can do. I couldn't. I had one needy baby and one very mellow baby, but it was just a lot of work. And then being a stay-at-home mom, I'm with these two on my own all day and trying to get everything done. I just didn't have time to pump any more than I could. Also, in those first 4 months, I also tried to do a power pump at 9 p.m. so that I didn't have to get up at midnight to pump. I would then just get up at 3 with the babies next feeding and pump then. I was able to go a 6-hour stretch. And during the breastfeeding journey, I never had clogged ducts or mastitis, if that's how you pronounce it. I never had any issues with them other than just trying to get more of a supply. I did get engorged a lot the first couple weeks. That was not fun dealing with, how many shirts you would go through. But I got it to where I could go about 6 hours if I needed to, in between pumps, if I needed to go shopping or sleep. I was able to do that, and I got used to just being engorged after 6 hours. At about 3.5 months, Rory would nurse a little bit. I was only able to nurse her like maybe once a day or once a week. I didn't really push it. I just kind of did it when I felt like it. And usually she would just nurse on one side, but then when it was time to switch her to the other side, she would throw a fit and wouldn't latch again. So then I had to do the bottle again. And then she only was that way for about 2 weeks. And then shortly after that, like a month later, Warren went through this weird phase where he wouldn't take a bottle at all. Like, he started crying the minute we tried to give him a bottle, or the bottle nipple was like touch his mouth. And so I thought he was teething, because I thought it was the whole sucking on the nipple, the suction and everything was hurting his gums for a new tooth. He was only 3.5 months old. But it was just the strangest thing. And so I was worried that my baby isn't eating and he's going to get dehydrated and he's going to starve. And just like last minute, I tried to nurse him. And he latched on right away, and he would nurse and he would do both sides. And that was fine. That was the only way I could feed him for about 2-3 weeks straight. He would not take a bottle, and I don't know why. We tried different ways, different people feeding him. We tried like where my husband would do the bottle and I'd have to be away, so like maybe he wouldn't get confused and think like, oh, I can just nurse for mom instead. But no, he would not take a bottle. And sure, it's fine nursing him. I loved it. It was special to me that I finally was able to get to nurse one of the babies. But then my other baby, Rory, she wasn't getting any breast milk, because by the time he was done nursing, I would try to pump after. And I would barely get a few ounces afterwards. And so Rory wasn't getting as much breast milk as he was. And so she was getting more formula, so she was gaining weight more than he was. And I was worried about that, because if I was going to breastfeed him, I wanted both of them to be breastfed. So slowly but surely, we eventually were able to get Warren to take a bottle again. We had to warm up the bottle. And at first we started just putting my breast milk in a bottle and warming it up. And he would take it, and then we slowly were able to get him back on formula. And then he started gaining a little bit more weight, and Rory then was able to get some breast milk. So once we were able to get Warren to take a bottle again, I still was able to breastfeed him at least once a day for the next 2 months. He wouldn't go to bed unless I nursed him to sleep. So after like 6 o'clock p.m. I wouldn't pump at 6, and because I wanted to make sure there was enough for his night bottle, I would say. And I would just nurse him to sleep, and which I didn't like that idea of him having to nurse to sleep, but it was how it happened. And so that was pretty special to me that I still got to nurse him. And around 5 months old, he found his thumb. I was replaced by his thumb. I have a picture where he just like delatched and started sucking on his thumb. And since then, it's always been his thumb. So I wasn't able to nurse him anymore. He just preferred his thumb. And once he found his thumb, he did start to go to bed earlier because he wouldn't go to bed until like way later in the night because he just wanted to stay up and nurse instead. So once he found his thumb, I was no longer of use to him for nursing. So the maximum I was ever able to produce from my milk supply was around 3.5 months. I was like working really hard trying to pump as much as I could for 30 minutes. And I only got a total of 30 ounces in one day, which that sounds like a lot if you just have one baby, but when you have two babies, that's not very much. But that was the most I ever got. Since then, I'd only get anywhere from 20, about 22 to 27 if I was really lucky. And it stayed that way from there on, and I could not get it to increase no matter how much I tried. And then again, at around 4 months, I also decided because my milk supply wasn't increasing, I would try to go back on the keto diet. I was on the keto diet before I got pregnant, and I was keto up until my last month of my pregnancy. And then I wasn't keto for 4 months because I wanted to make sure that my babies were getting everything they could and needed from my breast milk. And I was worried that keto would affect that. And if keto was going to affect it, I was going to stop doing it immediately and start eating more. But I did try keto again, and it did not affect my breast milk at all. I was still making the exact same. If anything, keto put more fat into my breast milk, especially when I would eat like fat bombs or anything like that. You can see the layer of fat in the milk in the bottles. So I've been keto since then, and it never affected my milk supply in a bad way. So at about 7 months, I was only producing enough milk for one bottle feeding for each baby out of 5. And since they were eating about 7.5, 8 ounces a day, 7.5 to 8 ounces a bottle, I wasn't getting enough, really, just breast milk. So they were having more formula than breast milk by then. And I also started a part-time job online from home. And by the time I would feed the babies and get them ready for a nap, and then I'd go pump, I'd only have about maybe 20 minutes left of nap time to work or shower or eat or do dishes or maybe start laundry. If I needed to shower, I had to pump before I showered. And at this time, the babies were only taking 30 minutes to 40-minute naps 3 times a day. And that was the only time I could go do something other than take care of the babies. Because, like I said, I have one very needy baby. And then by then, Warren was starting to get needy too. He needed mom's attention as well. So I had 2 of them who just needed me all the time. And I was exhausted. I felt like I couldn't get anything done. I felt like I wasn't anything. So I talked to my husband about if I should or not stop pumping because it was killing me to try to do everything in the day and trying to pump. And it's only maybe 1 bottle for each baby of the day. And I talked to my mom about it, that I was just so tired of pumping. And I mean, those who do pump completely understand you just want to sleep, but you have to pump. And you just like start to hate this pump. I'm like, oh, I don't want to deal with you. I want to be done. I want to be able to take a shower without having to pump first. I want to just go to bed. I want to go shopping without having to pump. It's just, the thing is in your mind every 3 hours, all the time. I talked with my mom about it, and she's like, well, why don't you just quit? I'm like, because I have to go for a year. And she's like, why? It's like, because you have to. She was telling me that when she was breastfeeding, she didn't have this peer pressure like we do from society and from social media these days, that you have to pump for a year. And in my mind, I felt like if I stopped now, then I was a failure. What would people think? I didn't make it to a whole year and I just quit. Like, I was worried that technically I'm still making milk, so why would you stop? That's how I was feeling. Like, technically I still could give a little bit of nutrition to my babies from me, so why would you stop? That is very selfish of you to stop. And that's how I felt. I felt like I was a failure. And I was so scared to death to do it. So I talked with my husband, and after a lot of back and forth and me sharing how I felt and was worried about it, we did decide that it probably would be the best for me to quit if I really wanted to start slowly drying up my milk supply. That way I could be a happier person. I could be happier around my kids and take care of them better. And so I would also feel a little bit more productive. And so the babies had turned 7 months, and I decided to slowly start drying up my milk supply. I would decrease 5 minutes from my time of pumping. Every 3 hours, I would decrease 5 minutes for 1 whole week. And then the next week, I'd decrease another 5 minutes. And then I would also try to go longer in between pumping until it came down to the point about a month later that I pumped my last pump, and it was like maybe an ounce total. And so then I decided, all right, I'm done. I made it to 8 months. My last pump was the day after the babies turned 8 months old. And I have to tell myself that it is a big accomplishment that I was able to go 8 months. It's a big accomplishment no matter what. If you're only able to breastfeed for 2 days, a couple weeks, a few months, anything. If this is what you truly wanted to do and you were able to do a little bit of it, that is a big deal. Because breastfeeding, nursing, pumping, however you look at it, it is a lot of work. A lot of work. And it's now been a month since my last pump. I did get a clogged duct for the first 2 weeks of my last pump. But I was able to work it out without having to pump again, because I was so worried if I tried to pump the clogged duct out, then I'd be sending my body mixed signals and it would start to try to make milk again, and I wanted it to be done. While I was pumping, I found this app. It's called Baby Log, and I think it's free, but I absolutely loved it. It had a little reminder to remind me every 3 hours or 4 hours, however long I set it to that it's time to pump. And then I could put a timer on there for how long I wanted to pump, and it would vibrate and tell me that you're done. And then you would document how much you got out of each side, and it kind of showed a chart of how your milk supply was and everything. And it was for pumping, nursing. You could do diapers, nap times, formula feedings. Okay, so this is my pumping station. I got the 3-shelf cart because I knew it would be the most helpful for me. So the top here has my Medela pump, and then I have a tablet that I liked to find a favorite show and only watch it when I had to pump, so it kind of made having to pump a little bit more bearable. And then I got the cream. I had this stuff, which I went through pretty quickly, and then my mother-in-law made me some more, and I went through another container or two about this size. I went through a bunch, actually. I just wanted to be cautious. And then I got my meds container here so that I remembered to do meds. In the second shelf, I had my container that I had all the pump parts in. So when I was done pumping, I just threw them in there. And then the spare bottles, my prenatals, the lids, and then the pads. And then before I was keto, I had the snacks down here because I was kind of hungry when I would pump or extremely thirsty, which I had my drink up on the very top. I hope you enjoyed hearing my breastfeeding journey. I know it was a little long. I talk a lot, but I hope it gives a little bit of help and peace of mind for others that are in a similar situation as I am. And I know this will be something I may need to look back on when we have our next baby, and if I want to breastfeed that next baby, I know I'll be like, oh my goodness, how did I do this again? So I hope you guys enjoyed, and you guys have a great day. Bye.